Welcome in, everybody, to a bonus edition Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. You apparently just can't get enough of Torres, okay? So here is the deal. We recorded a full episode of the Aaron Torres pod Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern time. We talked a little bit about Arkansas versus Kentucky, where those two teams are. Previewed UConn and St. John's, the big Friday night game, talk a little recruiting, and I did give a Super Bowl pick, okay? Well, I bring it up because if you were listening live, at the end of the show, I happened to insinuate, hey, late breaking news could be coming at Indiana University with Indiana basketball, and to just be on alert because, we might have to come back at some point this weekend. Well, I bring it up because that news officially just broke here moments ago as Jeff Goodman, I believe, was the first one to report it. Mike Woodson, Mike effing Woodson, baby, he has officially, it's not quite official yet, but basically he and Indiana are in talks for him to officially, quote unquote, retire and obviously for them to start a coaching search from here. And so what I want to do is I just want to do a quick 10, 15 minutes of reaction. No notes, no this, no that. We're just going live and reacting in real time. I will mention if you are listening on podcast, we are just going to put this at the front end of Thursday's show. So in other words, essentially, you're going to get this, then a full episode of the Aaron Torres pod immediately after. So a little bit of a long podcast episode, but we got to get it all out, 100, probably an hour 15 minutes when it's all said and done. But we really do. I appreciate your support. Before we get started, if you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. You can do it on Apple. You can do it on Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, whatever. Please make sure that you are subscribed to the pod. You want to do your boy Torres a solid, make sure to leave a 5-star rating, leave a 5-star review, all of that good stuff. Also, before we get started, I do it every day. I want to thank our partners. I want to thank our friends. I want to thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com, okay? So listen, I've said it a million times, but it's that time of year, 2025. You're trying to be healthy. You're trying to be responsible. It is so hard. And what you need more than anything, as you listen to the Torres pod, as you see, watch football, watch basketball, you need a healthy snack, but one that is also delicious. And my friends, that is where our friends at Collie Puffs come in, okay? New age snack food. You can find them in your grocery aisle, different than the Doritos, the Fritos, all that good stuff. Here's what you need to know. Family-owned company. Joey, sports fan just like you and I. And the bottom line was he was kind of sitting there one day saying, I'm sitting on the couch watching games. I have young kids. I need a snack that is healthy but also delicious as well for me, for them, whatever. And that's where Collie Puffs comes in. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease. But the best part is they taste freaking delicious, okay? And so for more information, this is what you need to do. Go to ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. ColliePuffs.com. Tell them Torres sent you. I appreciate your support. Also, by the way, nobody tweets in. Matt, make sure Torres eats some Collie Puff live. I need to see it. Maybe we will get to it at some point, not today. And also, producer Matt is busy working on other stuff. So this is Torres writing solo. So thank you to Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. With that said, show was done. It is done no more. There is no more time to waste. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the topic of the moment. And the topic of the moment is exactly what I said to lead the show, okay? So bottom line is, again, if you listen to our full episode of the Aaron Torres pod, basically on Thursday afternoon, there was 2 or 3 times where I said, I think something's going down in Indiana. I think something's going down in Indiana. Something is going down in Indiana. I think I even wrapped the show by essentially saying like, basically, if you have not, make sure to stay tuned because we might just be going live here sometime over the course of the weekend because I think there's going to be news in Indiana. And at the time, I wasn't really at liberty to share, but just moments ago, Jeff Goodman from the Field 68 does a great job, all that good stuff. He just put out the tweet that I had, I knew it was coming, but I didn't think it was official yet. And I think it is starting to become official. And it is essentially that Mike Woodson is basically not going to be your head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers anymore. I will read Goodman's tweet verbatim, and I will provide some context from there. And then we'll get into the interesting stuff, including coaching candidates, etc. But Jeff Goodman at about 5:19 Eastern time said, breaking, Indiana head coach Mike Woodson is contemplating stepping down in retirement, sources told the Field of 68. The Hoosiers have lost 6 of 7. Woodson has lost the support of high-level boosters, and there have been ongoing discussions today about his future, source told Field of 68. If Woodson does retire, the current plan would be for him to finish out the season. Indiana faces Michigan Saturday at Assembly Hall. All right, so that is the report. That is the, and this is not a knock on Jeff, to be clear. That is the PC diplomatic way of saying what is really going on at Indiana right now, okay? Here's what's going on in Indiana right now, okay? I can tell you this pretty good. Mike Woodson is not retiring, okay? Mike Woodson is not retiring. That's the bottom line. The truth is he is on the verge of getting fired, okay? So let me, because I know people are tuning in every couple seconds. When I say he's not retiring, it doesn't mean that he is going to be Indiana's head coach after this season. But what I can tell you is, because I had a lot of people kind of hit me up as soon as this news broke, this is not a Jim Larrañaga situation. This is not a Jay Wright situation, a Tony Bennett situation, a Roy Williams situation, where whether you're 55 or 75, you're just tired, you don't want to do this anymore, you're exhausted, the NIL portal thing isn't for you. No, this is Mike Woodson basically getting fired. Now, to be clear, it is going to be sold as a retirement. This is not a chosen retirement. This isn't Jim Larrañaga saying, I've had enough, I want to go kick up my feet on the beach in Coral Gables. This is Mike Woodson in year 4 at his alma mater, and as Jeff Goodman said, it is not going well, okay? As I record right now, 77-49 overall, 611 win percentage. That doesn't sound bad. But 36-36 overall. You missed the NCAA tournament last year. If you didn't go on a run in year 1, you would have missed the NCAA tournament that year when you made the, what was it, the first 4, I guess is what we technically call it. And basically, if you didn't convince Trace Jackson Davis to come back for his senior year, that was your best year. And even in your best year, even with a guy who was an All-American that is playing at a really high level in the NBA, you had 23-12, 12-8 with Trace Jackson, okay? Trace Jackson Davis. And so if you went 23-12 with Trace Jackson Davis, then you missed the tournament. You're 14-9 right now, 5-7. You've lost 6 of 7. It's not turning around. And I think the big thing, and this is something that we've discussed dating back to, to the springtime, Woodson basically was given every resource needed to win this season, okay? What I can tell you is kind of behind the scenes, he did what a lot of coaches do, and I don't blame him one bit, but he did the whole thing of, we don't have the right guys. We need more NIL money. We need money to retain the guys that we have and then build a team around them. We need money. And so I bring it up because it was pretty much understood that last year during the transfer portal cycle, Indiana was dealing with as much NIL money as basically anybody in college basketball. Okay, maybe Arkansas had a little bit more. Maybe BYU had a little bit more. Kansas State was a big spender last offseason. Kansas as well. But there was nothing that Indiana wanted that they were lacking as it pertained to the transfer portal. And so the good news is they got the resources that they wanted. The bad news is that when you have every resource that you want and you do not win, and you do not win big, by the way, you're going to be under a microscope. And so that is what is going on right now. I think for people who follow Indiana on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis, that there's been a lot of just off-the-court stuff. Like, I wouldn't call it 5-alarm fire, like players are out there being egregious. But Oumar Ballo was at a bar hours before a game. Like they had a noon, I think it was a noon or 1 p.m. Eastern tip-off in December. And he was pictured at the bar at like 1 a.m. the previous night. And so he was suspended for the next game, and Woodson wouldn't talk about it. And that was just a metaphor for this Mike Woodson era. Coming from the pros, he kind of treats them like pros. Not a super big disciplinarian. He's going to kind of handle things, do whatever. And it was just a program where players kind of doing what they want, coaches kind of doing what they want, whatever, okay? And so I just bring it up because it wasn't a total disaster, but it is not good. It is not getting better. And I talked about this on I guess it would have been Wednesday's Aaron Torres pod, is that at a certain point it becomes embarrassing. Because the one thing about Indiana, and I said this, is every school, every program kind of has their ethos. I talked about, being a UConn alum is you don't have to win every game, but there has to be a level of toughness, right? There has to be a level of no BS. Nobody pushes us around. We're UConn. We're tough. We're this or that. I also said, I live in LA, and I remember talking to somebody a couple years ago, kind of in the Steve Alford era. It wasn't Steve Alford specifically, but it was like, it's not just enough at UCLA to win. You got to kind of win with that showtime, with that flair, the Lonzo Ball. Like, you have to win that way. You can't just come out and win games 64-62. Fans aren't going to be happy. And the one thing about Indiana, I don't claim to know that fan base super well, but it's about the pride on the front of the jersey, right? You could criticize Bobby Knight for, the stuff that happened late in his career, but he was a great coach. And the one thing about his teams in the 70s and 80s, you were going to get maximum effort every single moment of every single game because that guy demanded it, okay? By the way, we might be having Dan Dockich on this show next week because he's going to be great on the potential Indiana stuff. So I just bring it up to very simply say is that, like, Indiana, you don't have to win every game, but you have to show a level of pride. You have to show a level of professionalism, and that's just not who this team is going to be. It's one thing if you're going to lose, but when you're embarrassing the school off the court, it's quite another issue. And so I bring it up because of the fact that it was always going to trend this way. And listen, I don't really care. I go ahead and give Mike Woodson credit to a degree, but it's being called a retirement. It is a firing. And I think the other reason that it's kind of a weird back and forth is because he's clearly not going to quit. He's got too much pride. There's also a lot of money on the line. And so what I believe right now is kind of a, it's a negotiation basically between the athletic department, between his representatives, and essentially it is a forced buyout, right? It's we're going to call it a retirement because you're an alum and we appreciate everything you did and blah, 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 and this and that. And you're going to kind of go on your way and whatever, and we'll make sure you get taken care of, but we're probably not going to pay you your full buyout. So that's what's going on. What I want to do now, I do want to go ahead and switch gears and kind of just talk about the big picture of the job, and then also beyond that, not just the big picture of the job, but also who are the realistic candidates. By the way, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, make sure you're following our Torres on Indiana account, late breaking news. Carter does a great job of helping me with that. He is the intern that is helping me, but make sure you're following Torres on Indiana, Torres on IU, because we are going to have a lot of coverage of this coaching search over the next couple months, and we think that's the perfect place for you to be. So first off, let's talk about the job, okay? Because to me, when it comes to this job, a couple things stand out. First of all, I think it's a better job than a lot of other people do. And what I would say about the job is what I said the other day. What I said was, listen, every job has its strengths, weaknesses, whatever. And I think there's this notion kind of on a national scale that, oh, it's Indiana, they haven't been good for this many years, and da-da-da-da, and nobody's going to want that job. I actually think it's the exact opposite. Listen, first of all, let me say this, and this is no disrespect to Indiana, because I would say the same thing about Kentucky. I'd say the same thing about Carolina, all that stuff. I don't think that, I think coaches sort of revere it as a great job, a great opportunity. But the reason any coach wants a job in 2024, 2025, do you have the money? Do you have the resources to compete at the highest level? And there's no doubt that if you're in the Big Ten or you're in the SEC, you're going to have the money needed to win at the highest level. Look at the SEC. Every team in the SEC is good. I mean, even the teams that are at the bottom of the standings were great in the out of conference, and it's because they have the money, they have the resources, they have NIL. And so you're going to be set up to succeed. You can criticize Indiana for whatever. As I said a minute ago, that NIL budget was as good as any budget in all of college basketball this offseason. And so if a coach goes into the portal saying, I can compete with anybody for any player that I want, that's where every coach wants to be, no different than any other sport. The Dodgers GM job is better than the Tampa Bay Rays GM job. It's just a fact. By the way, where did the Dodgers GM Andrew Friedman come from? Tampa Bay, for that exact reason. And so I think coaches want it. I think the other thing worth noting, you know how I know it's still a good job? Because you can make fun of the process that got us to Mike Woodson, but who did Mike Woodson replace? He replaced Archie Miller, who was quite literally the hottest candidate on the market before he took that Indiana job. It didn't work out, but everybody wanted Archie Miller when he was available. He chose Indiana. Tom Crean, we can make fun of the way it worked out. He was the hottest candidate available that year, and he was the hottest candidate a few years before that when he turned down the job and didn't take it. And so I just bring it up to say, I do believe this is a good job. And so with it, let's get to some of the potential candidates for this job, okay? So first of all, you guys are going to laugh because I got to start with kind of the two names that I think we have to start with, okay? I think the first group of candidates are the guys that you have to call, even though there is a 99.99999999999% 50% chance that they say no. And I think the first guy you have to call, I know who you think I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it, and you can laugh, but I have no problem with you going through the process of trying to get this guy. It's Indiana native Brad Stevens. Now, to be clear, I don't think Brad Stevens is taking the job. I think he's got maybe the best job in basketball right now. He's not a coach. He doesn't have to travel. He doesn't have to game plan, but his team is awesome with the Boston Celtics. He's a GM front office guy now. Doesn't have to deal with the day-to-day stress of being a coach. And the other thing is, like, I was talking to Mike Luke about this today. Mike Luke, the Arizona guy. I was on his pod. We were talking about Brad Stevens. And I said, like, the thing, too, is it's not only a great job. Your two superstars are young. Like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are what, 26, 27, 27, 28, whatever it is. You got another 5, 6, 7, 8 years runway with those guys. And so if you're the GM, I don't know why you'd want to leave. What do you got? Another 2, 3 rings potentially in you if you play this thing right? And so I think it'd be crazy. I think the other thing worth noting, Brad Stevens is only 48 years old. And so I bring it up because I'm pretty sure that, like, he's still got relatively young kids. And when I say relatively young, I don't mean like they're 2 and 3 years old, but I think he's still got kids in high school. And it's like, you got a great job. Nobody's forcing you out. You're not getting fired with the Boston Celtics. And so to me, it's like, you got a great job. Your kids are still in high school. What are you going to do? Move them in their junior year of high school, sophomore year of high school, when they've been in the same school system now for what, like 10, 12 years? Like, I just don't think it's realistic. So I think you call. I think you do the Godfather offer like you did before you hired Woodson, because there's no shame in doing it. I just don't think it's very realistic. I will counter that by saying, who I do think is realistic from kind of those NBA ranks? I think that you could at least get on the phone, and I think you could have an interesting conversation with Billy Donovan. I know it sounds crazy. Billy Donovan, why would he want to come back? Why would he want to do this? Well, it's the same reasons that we talked about with the Kentucky job a year ago. With the Kentucky job, if you remember, and we talked about it at the time, and I truly believe this, and I still truly believe it, is that when the Kentucky job opened, my understanding, and I talked to people who would know, Billy Donovan was willing to listen to the Kentucky job. The issue was him and the Chicago Bulls were in the play-in tournament. And basically, Mitch Barnhart's policy on that was like, if you win a game, what would it be? 2 games in the play-in tournament. Now it's another 2 weeks before I can hire you. And he just said, with this portal world that we live in, like, I can't be hiring a guy in the middle of April, late April. Like, you just can't do it. And so they kind of went their separate ways from Billy Donovan. But what I was basically told about Billy Donovan, he would have entertained the Kentucky Wildcats if they had been willing to wait until the Bulls season officially ended. They were not, but you now look at the Chicago Bulls. I know they just re-signed Lonzo Ball, and that's all well and good. They stink. They're in 10th place in the Eastern Conference. They're 22 and 30. I think by the time it's all said and done, they're going to miss the playoffs. And so all of a sudden, is that a situation where Billy Donovan is now through what, year 5 at with the Chicago Bulls? So Billy Donovan, I would assume, wouldn't want to assume, I think he's getting fired after this year, okay? And so if Billy Donovan's getting fired, it's like, one, he's not getting another NBA head coaching job, okay? This is year 5. He's made it to the playoffs one time as the Chicago Bulls head coach. And then, oh, by the way, outside of the year that he had KD and Russell Westbrook, he never made it out of the first round with OKC either. So the truth is, listen, Billy Donovan's not getting a third NBA head coaching job. And the crazy thing about Billy Donovan, even though he's got all that gray hair now, he's still only 59 years old. And so I just sit there and say, like, 59 years, is that a guy that wants to retire at 59 years old? Bill Belichick is freaking 73. He just took a college job. Pete Carroll, 72, 73. Rick Pitino, 72. Like, guys still want to work. And if you're Billy Donovan, you can get a truly great job, come back to college. And I think you have an opportunity to do pretty well. The other thing that I would add, Billy Donovan left college 4, 5, 6 years ago. I guess it was like 10 years ago now, which seems crazy. But he left 10 years ago because of the fact that, like, he just didn't want to deal with the recruiting stuff. And if you remember at the time, recruiting was kind of getting crazy. There was no loyalty. Everybody, let's just call it what it was. Everybody had agents at the time, even though they weren't called agents, and everybody pretended that it was still amateurism. Everybody had agents. Everybody's dealing with stuff behind the scenes. And I just think that, in my opinion, I just think that, in my opinion, he just got tired of all the nonsense. Well, now, listen, it's the portal. Listen, let me put it this way. If you choose to, and I don't know that this is the best way to do it, you can basically spend 1 month a year recruiting, which is April after the season ends. You get a roster, you retain 3-4 guys, and if you don't want to recruit high school, you don't have to. And then, you're recruiting another 5-6 every year. I mean, if you do it right, you don't have to do very much recruiting during the regular season. I mean, I still think you should send assistant coaches out on the road to kind of keep those relationships. But Billy Donovan, 8-9 years ago, you get a kid to commit in July. Then you got to fly up to his high school to watch practices. You got to fly up to his games. You get him signed. Now he doesn't feel love. He wants to decommit. It was a lot of stuff. It's different now. You have a collective. You have NIL. This is how much we have. This is what we offer. I coach in the NBA. You can play in front of 18,000 fans or whatever it is. You can play in the Big Ten. And it's either you take it or you leave it. And if not, we move on to the next guy. And so I actually think Billy Donovan is realistic. I don't think Brad Stevens is, but I do think Billy Donovan is realistic. With that said, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going because there are a couple more got a couple more things, a couple more guys that I think are at least worth conversating about. And they are, some names that you're probably pretty familiar with. The one name that I do think Indiana can get who's very good, and I see it in the chat, is Chris Beard. So Chris Beard, for people who do not know, well, I mean, I think he's the Ole Miss head coach coming off that win against Kentucky. Chris Beard, for people who do not know, remember, this is a guy that has ties to Bobby Knight. This is a guy that coached under Bob Knight at Texas Tech. He reveres Bob Knight. He still talks about him. And I will tell you this, I don't think that it was a coincidence that at halftime of the Kentucky Ole Miss game a few nights ago, Chris Beard was asked about his coaching style, about this and about that. And he basically said, yeah, that's an old Bob Knight, axiom of basically, hey, we got to do this to win, blah, 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 blah. And I don't even remember what he was talking about. I just know that he basically brought up Bobby Knight out of nowhere. Now, I know Indiana fans will be like, oh, he brings up Bob Knight all the time. That's his mentor. I thought the timing was pretty convenient. And the thing with Chris Beard, listen, I think he's one of the best coaches in the country. And what I would say about Chris Beard is, listen, he's not going to retire at Ole Miss. I can tell you for a fact, there was a moment in time where I think he was ready to go to Arkansas last year. And people say, Arkansas, Ole Miss, same thing. But remember, he was at Little Rock before, he went to Texas Tech. And when he was at Little Rock, he got the attention of some very important people in that state. And so I think he was ready to go to Arkansas. Now, depending on who you ask, some people say Arkansas fumbled the bag. Some people say Chris Beard pulled out. And some people just said, basically, end of story, is that Arkansas got wind that, hey, John Calipari might be interested in this job, and they kind of went in that direction. The point I'm trying to make, I don't think Chris Beard is tied to Ole Miss for the rest of his career. I think he stayed, at Ole Miss this offseason out of respect for them because they basically hired him when he was unhireable. But after 2 years, gets him to the NCAA tournament, I don't think he's going to be afraid to say, you know what, I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to try a high-profile job and a place that my mentor built into a power. And, oh, by the way, it's no different than Mark Pope at Kentucky, Dan Hurley at UConn. If you can take the historically great team back to the power that they've once been, you're an icon in that area and in that state. And I think Chris Beard's the guy that's crazy enough to say, I want the responsibility of bringing Indiana, back to the elite of college basketball. Now, realistically, I will say, listen, there's some stuff with Chris Beard that, you have to be comfortable with. We know about the allegations from a few years ago. We know why he was arrested. We also know that the charges were eventually dropped. And so ultimately, what you got to figure out is, was that a one-off deal? Was it true? Was it not true? And is he going to be somebody that does something similar to this if we bring him into our community? Okay. And so to me, that would be, listen, I don't know if it would be my first call, because I think my first call would be to Brad Stevens, even if he's going to say no. But I will counter that by saying that I think Chris Beard is kind of the first name on the list that I think he would say yes. And I think it's easy to sit there and say, no, he wouldn't. He's not going there. You guys talk about guys like Chris Beard all the time. He ain't retiring at Ole Miss, okay? No disrespect. I don't know if we have any Ole Miss fans in the chat. He's not retiring at Ole Miss. He's going to go somewhere else. He's going to do something else. And my guess would be it's probably going to be very soon. It's almost like Will Wade at McNeese. is that I don't think Will Wade was seriously considering other offers from last year because he felt like he owed McNeese another season with them. And then you fast forward and, he ends up doing his own thing. So I bring it up because I think year 2 for Beard, I think that to me, it's very realistic that he could end up going somewhere else. And if you're Indiana, you would be crazy not to make the call. A couple other names. Listen, I'll say this. Indiana fans are convinced that Dusty May, who of course will be in Assembly Hall on Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, whenever they play, would be interested in this job. Okay, so Dusty May is the Michigan head coach. Dusty May, remember last year, Indiana fans were trying to force Mike Woodson out because they were like, this guy, Dusty May, just went to a Final Four at Florida Atlantic. We have to get him before another school does. And so at the time, it was like, is it going to be Louisville? Is it going to be Ohio State? He chooses Michigan. But what's important to note about Dusty May is that Dusty May has a very reasonable buyout, right? And so there were a couple candidates that I heard people throwing around that I just thought were ridiculous because of buyouts. Does he want the job? Does he not? TJ Ottsberger has a $17 million buyout. No school in America is paying a $17 million buyout for a head coach because it's just too much. With NIL coming in where you got to pay $20 million per school to your athletes, with the cost of what it's going to take to actually, build out a staff, like TJ Ottsberger's guy, you're not paying $17 million to TJ Ottsberger just to get him out of his Iowa State contract, then another $6 million a year to pay him, then another $1.5 million to $2 million for a staff. It's just not happening. Money doesn't grow on trees. Sound like my grandma, but you get the point. And so I don't think TJ Ottsberger is realistic. But to get back to Dusty May's got actually a very reasonable buyout. I think it's $4 million, maybe even less. And so $4 million is a lot different than $16 or $17 million. You get him for $4 million, you pay him $5 million, whatever. And I just think he's an interesting candidate. Take a quick swig, by the way. Give me a second. All right, good stuff. I don't know. One thing I will say, and I try to be transparent with you guys. I try to spit facts. The one thing I will say, what I do not know about Dusty May, I have no idea what his interest would be. I will tell you this. I think if Indiana calls Chris Beard, I think he is interested. If they call Brad Stevens, I do not think he's interested. The one thing I will say about Dusty May, I have no feel for if he has any interest in leaving Michigan. My hunch would say that he probably is not. 1 year, I know it's his alma mater, but I think he's probably at the point where he's like, we're just starting to build something. We're one of the better teams in the Big Ten. I'm happy here. It's a football school. Sharon got to do is go ahead and, just win some games in between, and whatever happens in March happens in March. So I tend to think that I don't know if he would be interested, but I do think it's at least worth a call. And I think it's obviously a call that Indiana is going to make. So those are those guys. A couple other names that come to mind for me. By the way, just doing all this off the top of my head, we're at the 30-minute mark after doing an hour and a half podcast. Other names that come to mind for me, Todd Golden at Florida, another guy that had some off-the-court accusations this year, was cleared of any wrongdoing. I don't know that, I don't know that Florida's the last job for him. It's a good job in the SEC. I don't know that it's a great job, very good NIL. I give him credit. He's done a lot better than I thought he would do. But you do wonder, he's a guy that's not afraid to climb the ladder, right? Was at San Francisco, immediately flies across country and takes the Florida job. And the other thing I go back to, too, Indiana, I think in the pecking order of the Big Ten, is probably a little bit of a better job than Florida in the SEC. Florida, by the way, is set to lose most of their team. Walter Clayton's a last-year guy, fifth-year guy. Elijah Martin's a fifth-year guy. So you wonder if maybe, Todd Golden wants a reset. He's still very young. But does he want a potential reset? Because then you get to start fresh. You don't have to build the Florida roster. And again, I think the NIL is so good. I think all that, you have to at least listen. The other thing, too, the SEC is just a gauntlet. And you could say the Big Ten and the SEC run college sports. That's fine. But SEC basketball this year is a beast. And to me, I think there's going to be a few coaches over these next few years. Do you try to get out for an ACC job, for a big East job, whatever? Some of these conferences where it's a little bit more manageable to climb the ladder and a little bit more manageable to make your moves. And so I think he would at least listen. I think it'd be an interesting conversation. kind of in that same vein, who else I kind of feel the same way about Chris Jans is like Chris Jans is really, really, really good, really, really, really good. And he's at a really tough spot at Mississippi State. Mississippi State respectfully is a very good job. It is, it's a very good job, but in the SEC, it's probably a bottom 3, bottom 4 job. And you wonder, like, how much better is it going to get? And how much more does that guy want to bang his head against the door trying to break through? When again, honestly, it's just a situation where Arkansas has better resources, whoever. Tennessee has better resources. Kentucky certainly has better resources. Texas A&M, LA, there's plenty of jobs that I think would be that I think that he would have to at least consider, because that's just such a tough place to coach. So those are my candidates. I think you got to call Brad Stevens. I think you got to call Billy Donovan. And then from there, I think you would also have to call Chris Beard. I think he's the first. I think he's going to say yes if you take it. A couple names I don't think. I said TJ Otzelberger. Listen, $17-18 million buyout. It's not happening. Like, again, just think about it like this. Schools are going to have to pay players $20 million, okay? Indiana just signed Signetti to a new deal. What was it? $8-9 million a year. On top of that, you would have to pay now $17 million, $16 million for TJ Otzelberger to get him out of that contract. That's assuming he wants to come. But, 16, 17 million just to get him out of that contract. You're going to have to pay Woodson something. Then on top of that, you got to pay Otzelberger another 5 or 6 to be your head coach. So that one just never made sense to me. Scott Drew, listen, I've seen some Scott Drew stuff. If you're going to turn down Kentucky and Louisville, you're not taking Indiana. Like, what are we even talking about? He's retiring at Baylor. Good for him. They're going to have a statue built for him. He won a national championship at a place that I still think that's the greatest rebuilding job in the history of college basketball. But he is not leaving for another job. I'm trying to think of other names. Nate Oates is obviously not leaving. I'm just trying to think of other names. All right, really quickly, let's see if we get to a couple of other. Let's get to a couple questions. Let's see here. So this is a good one. Brandon Alton, who looks like he appears to be an Indiana fan. Our next coach will come out of the SEC, book at 18. I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense with the 3 names that I said. Chris Beard has to be, like, if I was putting betting odds, we're going to be working again with BetUS this March, okay? If BetUS said, Torres, put together a board for us of coaching candidates at Indiana, I would put Chris Beard as the favorite. I wouldn't put it at minus 10,000, but would I put it at minus 175? Yeah, I probably would. Todd Golden, I think, would pick up that call and listen. Chris Jans, I think, would pick up that call and listen. And so I think that actually makes a lot of sense. The other thing I keep going back to with the SEC, it's so hard. It is just so tough. There's so many good teams where the Big Ten, you look at the Big Ten, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of okay in the Big Ten. There is not a lot of great in the Big Ten. Rutgers is not very good. Iowa, I know they just lost their best player. Northwestern's not good. Minnesota's not good. Penn State's not good. Washington's not good. Even like the middle, like Illinois is struggling. UCLA's hot, but they kind of stunk for a minute. I think Musselman's going to get it going at USC, but he's not there yet. There's wins to be had in the Big Ten, and I think I think somebody is going to really want that job. By the way, I didn't even mention Ben McCollum, who I think makes a lot of sense. Couple other names. All right. Let's see. This is amazing. Shane says, I still think Steve Alford could do well as the Indiana coach. Listen, Shane, you're a great guy. I'm not here to disrespect you in any way, shape, or form. I think that ship sailed. And listen, I've been criticized as being too negative with Steve Alford. When he was at Nevada, when he got hired by Nevada, I said that was not the move I would have made. And so Nevada fans hate me. I don't know that dude has the juice at his age. And I know he's, probably no older or younger than Billy Donovan. I don't know that Steve Alford, I think he's just kind of, I hate to say it, I think he's just kind of riding it out, waiting for retirement. He's going to keep coaching in Nevada as long as they want him. The guy's like 60 years old. I don't see that one at all. Let's look at some other ones. Angel says, I would take Beard now. Yeah, I'd take Beard now too, man. I don't know if they're going to make the call. They should make the call. I think they'd be insane for not making the call. Oh, this is fun. Francisco, that's fun to say. Where's the original comment? I'm trying to look for it. Hold on one sec. Oh, this is it. So Glenn says Brad Stevens is much more realistic this time. He and Dolson, that's the AD, are in touch weekly. Listen, if that's being reported by Indiana beat writers, I will take their word for it. I don't have that sourced. I mean, they could talk for a lot of reasons. They could be friends. Stevens could be in an advisory role. It doesn't mean that he's going to actually take the job. And I'm not disrespecting you, Glenn. I think you probably have some reason to say that. But just because they're talking every week doesn't mean that he's taking the job. But it was funny because later on in the chat, somebody says, Glenn, Brad Stevens is not in play. He's not coming to Indiana. I will bet my house note on it. Rick, you want to? We should get a little contest going. Rick puts his house note on Brad Stevens not being the head coach, and we get Glenn involved who originally put it out there. So I'm with you. Listen, you got to make the call. I don't think so. And what I could see realistically is Brad Stevens being a consultant. Brad Stevens is in the NBA. He knows people. He knows agents. He knows this. He knows that. My guess is that he probably is very much a consultant. I don't know that means that he's going to hire them. Let's see here. Glenn is adamant. Brad is in play. That is Brad Stevens. So we will see about that. A lot of Kentucky talk here. Brad Stevens to Kentucky. Billy Donovan to Kentucky. Let's see what else here before we get out of here. I've been live on air basically since freaking probably the last 5 hours. I did an hour podcast with Mike Luke from the Arizona pod right after we got off the main show. Let's see here. Shaka Smart is being brought up. Listen, I think Shaka, it's too early to say a guy in his 40s, and I think Shaka is still in his 40s. I think it's too early to say that a guy is going to retire at a place. But I do think, Shaka is probably, in my opinion, going to retire at Marquette. He did the big time high major job thing. It did not work out. He was obviously not a fit at Texas. And I think he saw kind of the positives and negatives of this profession. Shaka, by the way, only 47 years old, making me feel like I'm a worthless pile of crap because I'm certainly not 47, but I'm no spring chicken either. But I think Shaka kind of saw the benefits and the drawbacks of coaching at one of those major spots. And I think he's comfortable at Marquette for now. By the way, Marquette's another team. They could be playing like deep into March. So it's like, I don't know that you're getting them. I guess you could say the same. For, Todd Golden, Chris Beard, whatever. All right, really quick. Oh, people are down on Mark Pope right now because somebody just said hire Mark Pope as a defensive assistant. That Kentucky defense is not very good right now. I don't think Mark Pope will be going to Indiana as a defensive assistant. So great call by John because I missed this name in the first go around. Ben McCollum from Drake started from the bottom. Now we're here. Worst joke in the world. Ben McCollum. All the guy does is win. 21-2 this season at Drake. He was the guy that won 4 national championships. At Northwest Missouri State as a D2 head coach. How about this for a resume? 4 national championships before the age of 43 years old. The first one coming in 2017, which would have made him, 38 at the time? That's an insane resume. 2017, 2019, tournament canceled in 2020, 21, 22. And then, oh, by the way, is at Northwest Missouri State, goes to Drake. And then in year 1 has Drake at 21-2 right now as we speak. And they are very comfortably atop the standings in their league. Let's keep it going. Good show, Aaron. Thank you, Angel. By the way, we did a full pod earlier in the day talking about a lot of, recruiting stuff, things of that nature. So make sure to go back and check that out as well. By the way, really quickly, if you're not subscribed to the show, what are you doing? Make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. If you are coming in or if you are watching on Twitter, we have almost 1,000 of you just watching on Twitter. find the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube, click subscribe, do your boy Torres a favor. We are at just under 49,800 subscribers, which means that we can get to 50,000 in the next week or so, but I cannot do it without your support, so make sure to do so. One or two more questions before we get out of here. Let's see here. What about... I don't know what this is. What about at Lewis Coach, former ISU coach? I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means at all. S. Jack asking the always important question, can anything stop the big pig invasion? All right, really quickly. I had not seen this. Apparently, Goodman has suggested Rick Pitino as the head coach. Listen, I like Jeff. Jeff's always good to me. So I feel like anytime I'm criticizing another media member, it seems like I'm taking a shot. I'm not. I guess what I would just say is this, is that, and I said this, by the way, on Mike Luke's podcast. I said this on Mike Luke's podcast the other day. By the way, Eddie really hates my merch. Eddie, bro, if you don't want to buy a t-shirt, it's not bootleg. It is professionally made. If you don't want to buy a shirt, don't freaking buy it. By the way, a lot of Mike F. and Woodson t-shirts that are still available after today. Eddie apparently hates small businesses and does not support them. Also, I think Kentucky's Collective is doing just fine with me. By the way, anyone who's actually sold t-shirts and merchandise knows by the time I print them up, I'm doing them for the fans, okay? By the time I print them up and ship them out, you're making like $2-3 a shirt. It's not a big deal. I do it because the fans like it. It's been fun. It's been a fun way to branch out. So shout out to Eddie for his interest. So, okay, Goodman talking Pitino. So I was on Mike Luke's podcast earlier today. Mike Luke is a great Arizona beat writer. And he kind of we were talking about Pitino. He's obsessed with Pitino, who isn't. By the way, we might be doing some stuff with the new Pitino, thing that's coming out from Vice. We'll keep you updated on that. But anyway, Pitino to Indiana. Okay, so what I told Mike and what I truly believe, sorry, I thought I signed out of here for half a second. What I told Mike and what I know for a fact, Pitino, why I was so adamant that St. John's needed to get him. Pitino's 72 years old. There's only two places on planet Earth that Rick Pitino wants to live. He wants to either live in New York City or he wants to live in Miami where he has a house. I think it's more realistic that he takes the Miami job than it is the Indiana job. He doesn't want to go to Indiana. He doesn't want to go to Bloomington. I trust Jeff. I like Jeff. I have no personal beef with Jeff. I know a lot of fans don't like him. I like Jeff. He's always been great to me. So there's no disrespect to Jeff. Pitino's a New York guy, Knicks coach. He doesn't want to move to Bloomington, Indiana. Here's the other thing, and I said it on today's pod too when we were talking about Nate Ament, the 5-star player that St. John's might be recruiting, they might not be recruiting, is that Pitino is now telling high school recruits, I know this for a fact, he's not even recruiting high school players much anymore because he's basically telling them, I can't promise you that I'm going to be here for 4 years if you're not a one-and-done type player. And so if Pitino realizes he might have less than 4 years left, you think he's going to rush off and take another job at 72 years old? He'll be 73 this year. And anyhow, I understand. No, he's perfect for St. John's. He's got him rolling. I understand that it's always going to be a year-to-year thing with the NIL portal stuff. He's not taking the freaking Indiana job. I'm sorry. A couple more, we'll get out of here. McDermott at Creighton. I believe he just signed an extension. I will tell you, last year, there was a lot of buzz about Greg McDermott. Yeah, not Doug. Greg McDermott leaving the Creighton for another job. He has a house in Arizona, and there was talk about if Arizona State fires Bobby Hurley, could he be a candidate? And then there was other jobs. I think Ohio State. I think Greg McDermott. I keep calling him Craig. I think Greg McDermott actually retires at Creighton. He's actually probably a little bit older than I think a lot of people realize. Let me look it up really quick. Greg McDermott is 60 years old. Yeah, so it's more realistic that he's going to start over than Rick Pitino is. But McDermott's another one. I don't think he wants that limelight. he likes to golf. He likes to kind of be low key. Omaha's kind of a big enough town where he's kind of a rock star, but he can also golf and do what he wants to do, when he wants to do it. And obviously that's not who you're going to be at Indiana. So I don't see him being a realistic candidate. I think he's happy. I thought he was going to leave last year. I thought there was real buzz that last year was going to be the year that he started looking at other jobs. He didn't sign a big extension. I think he retires there. By the way, I appreciate, Jonathan asked about the former ISU coach, and I didn't understand what he was saying. He's talking about Josh Schertz, the head coach at St. Louis, who was at Indiana State last year. Interesting story on him. I think there was a thought that it was interesting because I think Louisville was kind of seriously trying to get him. And I think basically before remember, Indiana State was one of the first 2 or 3 teams that missed the NCAA tournament. And I'm pretty sure that he had basically agreed to terms to take the St. Louis job. And so Louisville tried to at least make the call. And I think they realized that we probably can't get him. So, I think he's still, St. Louis is playing really well, 14-9, 7-3 in the A-10. I think he's probably another one that's like a year away from being like the right guy for a job like this. I think they could do worse. I think he'd actually do well, but I think, probably, listen, I think you can get Chris Beard. I think Todd Golden picks up a phone call. So I don't know that Schertz is the guy that you go and get in this moment. Let's get to maybe one more question, then we'll get out of here. Let's see here. What else kind of questions do we have? All right. Apparently, this is turning into what is Calipari's future segment. Brandon says, I thought Shaka was the right guy for Georgetown. I thought it would be interesting. I think Ed Cooley's actually be pretty good at Georgetown. John says, still think Otzelberger's worth a call. I just think the financials don't add up, and I'll be quick on this, John, but if you remember, I was one of the guys that I thought if Ryan Day at Ohio State football loses in the first round of the college football playoff, I actually do think that he was going to get fired. But there was even talk even Ohio State, because he had $13-14 million buyout at the time. And it was like, so you're going to, whatever it was, I don't remember what it was, but you're going to pay $10 million to buy out Ryan Day. His staff, obviously, some of them had long-term deals. You're going to have to pay athletes $20 million straight from the athletic department next year. And then you're going to go get another coach that's going to cost you $10 million. It's just not realistic. And so with Otzelberger, listen, you can give him a call, but do you have $17 million? I mean, the buyout isn't $4 million. I think even like $7-8 million is doable. $17 million, when keep in mind, you also are going to have to pay athletes $20 million, and you're going to owe Mike Woodson something. And then on top of that, again, just think about it. Otzelberger isn't coming for free. If you buy out his contract at Iowa State, that just means you're paying Iowa State $17 million. And after that, you have to then go ahead and hire Otzelberger and pay him $6-7 million from there. So you're talking about $17 million just to get him out of his contract, then another $6-7 million to sign him. You're going to owe Woodson some sort of money. You're going to owe maybe some of his staff some sort of money. Now you got to pay assistant coaches. It's a lot of money. So you can call. I just don't know how realistic it is. Brandon says, Josh Schertz was the person I was thinking. Let's see here real quick. This was interesting. So the announcement now was to turn down the temperature at Assembly Hall because Dolson, Dusty May, and Mike Woodson do not want to hear toxic fans. So this actually makes sense. And I haven't looked into this part of it. But again, Michigan is playing at Indiana this weekend. And Michigan is playing at Indiana. And of course, Michigan is their head coach is Dusty May. And Dusty May, of course, is the former Indiana student manager who a lot of people want as the head coach. And so I just bring it up because what Russell is insinuating is basically they're making this announcement now because they don't want to be booing Mike Woodson and saying, we want Dusty May when Mike Woodson still has the job. The counter to that is now you're just going to hear, we want Dusty, we want Dusty, we want Dusty. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, we are somehow at 49 minutes of live content here. But I'll tell you what, I think it is time for me to get out of here. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, do yourself a favor. Please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, whenever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. If you're listening on podcast, I appreciate your patience. But yeah, I think it's time for me to get out of here. Shout out to Torrent Craig. By the way, make sure you're following our Torres on IU account, Torres on IU, for late breaking Indiana news. All for today's show. I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Rachel, who hates my voice. Yeah, it's time for me to go. Thank you for your support. I will be back. I'll probably be back on Sunday now. We're probably going to have to talk about this more. New episode, Aaron Torres Pod. Appreciate you.